What's going on, everyone? It's your boy, the Fantasy Football Almanac, and it's here, week 1 of football. It was awesome. It was spectacular. So many good games, so many shootouts, everything like that. Today, we're going to be discussing lessons learned from each NFL game, every single one from this past weekend. But before we get started, if you guys could, it would mean the world to me. If you guys could go down, leave a like, leave a comment. I will be answering every single comment you guys have. And subscribe to the channel if you do enjoy the content. With that out of the way, let's get started with the first game of the NFL season, Bills versus the Rams. So the first lesson learned for the 2022 NFL season, week 1, Bills versus Rams. First lesson learned is that Darrell Henderson is the lead dog in this Rams offense here. For one, he got 18 touches. The next best running back, Cam Akers, coming off a torn Achilles, got 3. This guy basically got no touches. He wasn't involved whatsoever. Darrell Henderson getting 13 carries and 5 targets for 5 receptions, putting up 70 total yards in a terrible game script for running backs. I am really looking forward to picking up more and more Darrell Henderson shares. As time goes on, I think Darrell Henderson is going to be an absolute beast. And they were playing the number 1 ranked defense in the Bills, so that's why the production wasn't necessarily there. But the usage was definitely there, and that's what we're looking for in this week 1 matchup here. Darrell Henderson is a must pick up for any fantasy football team, and if somebody is willing to trade him low, I would absolutely scoop him up. That's it for our first matchup, though. Let's move on to the Saints versus the Falcons. For the Saints-Falcons game, there was really 2 lessons that we learned here. For one, Michael Thomas is absolutely back. 57 yards, 5 receptions on 8 targets, and 2 touchdowns. I don't know if these 2 touchdowns will be coming in every week, but it is week 1, the first time he has played football in a year and a half. This guy hasn't played in forever. And he comes out and absolutely balls, looks like the lead dog out here. And then the second lesson learned, Cordarrelle Patterson looked like an absolute beast out there. I mean, people were expecting him to get lower usage. This game against the Saints was tough. I mean, the Saints have a very stout defense here, and Patterson was still able to put up 21 points in half PPR scoring with 22 carries, 120 yards, a touchdown, and 3 receptions on 5 targets for 16 yards. I mean, 16 yards, nothing special. But the fact that he was able to put up 136 yards from scrimmage and a touchdown, I mean, this just proves this is their guy. Yes, I know Damian Williams was out here, but realistically, they trusted Patterson in this lead back role 100%. Although Damian Williams and Tyler Algier may sap some carries from him in the long term, this is living proof right here that Cordarrelle Patterson will be that dog yet again this season. The next game I want to talk about is the Browns-Panthers game. My lesson for the Browns, there are 2, and both of them correlate with each other. The first lesson is you can't trust any of these Browns pass catchers here. Jacoby Brissett throwing for 147 yards, 18 of 34. I mean, realistically, you're not going to be able to support any fantasy football options here on this team. Amari Cooper, yes, he is useful in these best ball leagues where we're trying to maximize value in the late rounds of the season, but if you can get anything from Amari Cooper in your standard casual redraft leagues with your friends, I would absolutely do it. And the second lesson is Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt can absolutely still feast together. Kareem Hunt looked ridiculously good. 15 total touches here and 2 touchdowns. And Nick Chubb also looked fabulous as well. 22 carries for 141 yards. I mean, how much better can it get than that? Both of these running backs here absolutely feasted. They have a pretty easy schedule for the first 4 weeks. I think Kareem Hunt is at least worth a flex play here in this upcoming week. All right, next up here is the 49ers versus the Bears. And my takeaway from this game is simple. If teams are playing in torrential downpour, do not start anyone from that offense. Darnell Mooney, a guy I would have considered at least a flex play in most formats, scored 1 point. Trey Lance looked awful. Debo had a rushing touchdown because Elijah Mitchell went down early. David Montgomery didn't do much. Khalil Herbert didn't do much. Justin Fields had 13 points. This was not a high-scoring fantasy output for anyone. And it's because of the torrential downpour. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw the clip of, I forget exactly who it was, but sliding after their touchdown. I mean, that was just absolutely ridiculous. Don't play people if they are in torrential downpour. That is my advice for this game. Now let's move on. The next game I want to talk about is the Steelers-Bengals game. And my lesson for this game is don't trust rookies and crowded offenses. Yes, Pickens had tons and tons of preseason hype here. But realistically, when the full offense was on the field, when Deontay Johnson was on the field, Chase Claypool, Pat Freiermuth, the guy was barely targeted. And I think he will get targeted more throughout the season. But realistically, I mean, it's week 1. Mike Tomlin came out and said he didn't really want to use George Pickens that much. He will have boom games, but at the same time, this offense is really, really crowded. I mean, I know Najee Harris did leave halfway through, but you also have Najee Harris. This offense is really, really crowded, and they're not going to just hand a rookie the reins unless they're Justin Jefferson levels of talent, unless they're Jamar Chase levels of talent. And George Pickens, we just don't know if he is that yet. So that's my lesson from this game. Let's move on. My lesson from the Eagles-Lions game is simple. Jalen Hurts and the Eagles look to put up an absolute ton of points and might be fantasy gold this season. I mean, Jalen Hurts putting up 24 points without a passing touchdown. It looked like every time Jalen Hurts would throw a pass to A.J. Brown, it would go for 50 yards. They would get stopped on the 1. And then they would run it in with Boston Scott, Miles Sanders. I mean, this is the first time the Eagles have had 4 different rushing touchdowns from 4 different players since 1961. I don't expect that to happen again. I think Jalen Hurts is an absolute gold mine. But also, A.J. Brown looked much, much better than I anticipated. I mean, I thought there wasn't enough work to go around, everything like that. But apparently there is. If Devonta Smith's getting 0 receptions, if Dallas Goedert's not doing anything here, if A.J. Brown really is that dog and commanding 40% of the volume like he commanded in this first game, then I think A.J. Brown is an absolute must-start here, and somebody I would like to admit that I was wrong on here. I think A.J. Brown now is a really, I mean, he was always a really, really talented player, but now he's a must-start for me in all fantasy. Try and trade for him if you have somebody that might be a little bit more concerned about this offense. I really, really love A.J. Brown here. Next up is the Colts-Texans game, and it's kind of similar to my Steelers-Bengals take or lesson learned, and it's don't trust these really, really overhyped rookies. Dameon Pierce was a guy I was pretty off on. I mean, he was a 4th-round pick, a guy on a terrible offense. Yes, he was confirmed the starter at the time, but then we come in and we see the veteran Rex Burkhead get pretty much all the carries and all the targets, and I'm going to be talking more in depth about Rex Burkhead in my waiver wire video that's coming out tomorrow. But Rex Burkhead pretty much stole the show here for the Texans. Yes, he was not that great from a production standpoint, but he did get a lot of the volume here. And again, that's what we're chasing. So I would recommend taking Rex Burkhead as a sneaky week 1 pickup. Dameon Pierce will be potentially more integrated into this offense as the weeks go on. But again, he's a 4th-round pick. Rex Burkhead, the veteran, they may be trying to trust the veteran a little bit more. But that's it for the Texans game. Let's move on here. The next game I want to talk about is the Patriots versus the Dolphins. And again, I have 2 lessons here. The first lesson is you cannot trust any of these Patriot running backs. I mean, yet again, season after season, we always say these Patriot running backs stink to trust. They are impossible to trust here. And yet again, we see it. Very even splits between Ramondre Stevenson, Damian Harris, Ty Montgomery was even involved. I mean, there is just no viable starting option from week to week. I would be very hesitant to trust any of these guys, and I'm fine trading away Ramondre. I'm fine trading away Damian Harris if there is someone in your league who still buys into this narrative somehow. The Dolphins, on the other hand, Tua proved he can support multiple fantasy wide receivers. I mean, Jalen Waddle putting up 15 points, had a ridiculously nice 42-yard touchdown. Tyreek Hill getting 12 targets here. This, I mean, just proves to me they can support 2 wide receivers here, and they will be getting in a fair amount of shootouts in a division with the Bills. I think this is positive news for the Dolphins, but negative news for the Patriots. Anyways, let's move on. For these next 2 games, I think it's fair we can combine the lessons that we learned from both games together into one game. And the games I'm going to be talking about are the Jags and the Commanders and the Ravens Jets. And my lesson is, this is going to be a timeshare in both of these offenses. whether it's Michael Carter and Breece Hall or Travis Etienne and James Robinson, both of these running back groups look to be in committees. And if that's the case, I want the cheaper option. I want James Robinson. I want Michael Carter on my rosters, because if something happens to Breece Hall, if something happens to Travis Etienne, I mean, these guys automatically become RB2s in your offense. And if that's the case, why not take the cheaper one? Why not take the guy you can get at a much cheaper value, sometimes in a free agency? I know James Robinson's still on the waiver wire in a lot of leagues here, and if that's the case, I would go pick him up with your first waiver wire. I mean, there's just nobody else you'd want here. The only other lesson you could take away from any of these games is that Carson Wentz actually looked pretty decent, honestly. 4 touchdowns. I mean, it was a very Winston stat line. 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 300 yards. Jahan Dotson balled. There was proof that Carson Wentz can still support receivers even if the team is not all that great. And that's really what you like to see for this Commanders team. Anyways, let's move on to my next team. All right, so the next game I want to talk about is the Chiefs versus the Cardinals. And my main takeaway is that despite Pat Mahomes putting up 35 fantasy points, 30 for 39 completions, 360 yards, 5 touchdowns, no wide receiver on the Chiefs finished with double-digit points in half PPR scoring. Mecole Hardman was the highest with 9.1 fantasy points. The Chiefs will lean on the run, and Travis Kelce way more this season. Clyde Edwards-Helaire putting up 20 points. Isaiah Pacheco getting a lot of garbage time yardage. Jerick McKinnon even looked good. This team will be running the ball a ton here, and Travis Kelce will be utilized an absolute ton. That is my main takeaway. Let's move on. Alright, so the next game I'm going to be talking about is the Vikings-Packers game. The first thing I want to talk about is Justin Jefferson is absolutely that guy. I mean, career high in yards here, 35 half-point PPR points, 9 receptions, 11 targets, 184 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I mean, he looked absolutely unstoppable out there. It was crazy. Enough said about Justin Jefferson, though. The other insane storyline from this game was A.J. Dillon versus Aaron Jones. A.J. Dillon, 10 carries, 45 yards, and a touchdown. 5 receptions, 6 targets, receiving 46 yards in that category as well. Aaron Jones limited to 5 carries, but he did put up 49 yards. 3 receptions, 5 targets, and 27 yards. It's clear A.J. Dillon is the lead back in this offense, or at least operating in a 50-50 timeshare. And if that's the case, I want A.J. Dillon. I want the cheaper option bet. The next game that I want to talk about is the Chargers versus the Raiders. And I think in this game, Josh Allen proved that he doesn't need Keenan Allen. He doesn't need Mike Williams. This guy can ball with absolutely anyone on the field. DeAndre Carter was the lead receiver in this offense. That just doesn't even seem real. He put up more than Keenan Allen. Granted, Keenan Allen went down with an injury. Joshua Palmer, he put up way more than Joshua Palmer. Way more than Mike Williams. He looks like an absolutely phenomenal player out there. And also, the other takeaway from this game is that Davante Adams is a black hole worse than I thought. I was fading Hunter Renfrow, I was fading Davante Adams, and I was fading Darren Waller because I didn't know exactly how the target distribution would go down in an offense like this. Turns out, Davante Adams is going to be dropping 100 yards a game. He had 17 targets, 10 receptions. I mean, guy was a baller through and through. Didn't look like he was missing a step. And him and Derek Carr were absolutely on the same page. He also made that insane end zone grab. I mean, that was one of the most phenomenal catches of the week. Maybe aside from Deontay Johnson's 25-yard wild catch that got overturned, actually. But phenomenal catch right there. Let's move on to our second to last game here. For the Giants-Titans game, the lesson is simple. Saquon Barkley is that guy. And I'm really glad about it. For one, I'm a Giants fan. But two, this is a guy I was pushing heavy. I had him as my running back 7, way ahead of consensus. He was one of my prime running backs on my undervalued running backs list. But he is absolutely that guy. 18 carries, 164 yards. That run he had from his own 10-yard line where he ran 70 yards. It was just absolutely beautiful, vintage Saquon. To go along with that, he had 6 receptions on 7 targets for 30 yards. And the game-winning 2-point conversion. I mean, that 2-point conversion was so up and down. I thought we were toast. I thought it was over for Saquon Barkley, but he found a way to do it because it's Saquon Barkley putting up 30 half-point PPR points. That's all I need to say, though. Saquon Barkley is absolutely an RB1 for this next season. I mean, just 100%. Any rumors that he might not be, anything that he might be inefficient for this upcoming season, laid to rest here. Now let's move on to our last topic, though. The Bucs versus the Cowboys. That game looked awful. For one, QBs who lose O-line pieces, they just tend to be worse. I mean, it's really tough to battle. When you lose some O-line pieces, Tom Brady didn't really look all that great, putting up 10 fantasy points. And Dak Prescott now out for 2 months with a hand injury. This will lower the stock of CeeDee Lamb and pretty much every single other player on the Cowboys here. The only player that really looked great this game was Leonard Fournette. Julio Jones might be a waiver wire pickup here. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it from me. Really excited for the Week 1 NFL season. Let me know how your fantasy teams did down below in the comments, whether you're 1-0, 0-1, or if somehow you tied like the Colts and Texans. Let me know down below in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Would really mean the world to me. Love all you guys so much. We're going to be putting out content every single day throughout this fantasy season. That's it from me, though. As always, have a good day, a good night, and a good life.